When Hong Kong was rocked to its foundations by anti-government protests, Carrie Lam, as the city's leader, bore the brunt of public anger.
The experience in 2019 was very difficult and very painful.
But now, with Beijing's full backing to implement far-reaching changes aimed at ensuring the city does not descend into chaos again, she is no longer the embattled leader. Rather, she exudes a new air of confidence that borders on defiance directed at her critics. Nearing the end of her first 5-year term in office, she will not divulge whether she will seek re-election, but certainly does not sound like someone who is bowing out.
I'm stronger. I can now take whatever challenges that come my way.
She talks about Beijing's increasingly hands-on approach to Hong Kong affairs.
I don't feel that the chief executive's position has been undermined by officials.
And is candid about her priorities under the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Opening up the mainland is far, far more important than bringing in overseas business people.
In this episode of Talking Post, Chief Executive Carrie Lam opens up about her legacy, Hong Kong's future, and more.
If you look down the road, then Hong Kong's future is really bright.
Chief Executive, thank you very much for joining us. You're a hard lady to get hold of, but you're finally here. Looking at your legacy, what kind of Hong Kong are you now leaving in the hands of the next administration? What have we reached, considering where we went in 2019, since the handover, and where we are now? What future are we facing?
It will be a Hong Kong which, for the first time since 1997, is progressing on the right track of one country, two systems. We never have this track laid out for Hong Kong in the last 24 years. Okay, at various periods we seem to be more successful than other periods. At some periods we have more chaotic scenes in Hong Kong. But in no time, in my view, did we actually have this confidence that Hong Kong will move forward in strict accordance with one country, two systems. Because by the mere fact that we did not have any national security law to protect national security would not give us and central government the confidence that this is a safe place. This place will continue to be exploited in a geopolitical situation, and there will be external forces coming in, and so on and so on. So with the national security law, I think in place, Hong Kong at least has this very important guarantee that one country, two systems could now move ahead without that huge worry. And if you look down the road, then Hong Kong's future is really bright yonder. I'm not saying this because I am the incumbent chief executive. I have seen enough of Hong Kong. I have been in the government for 4 decades. I just find Hong Kong now very well positioned to take advantage of the national development opportunities, especially with the Greater Bay Area.
But the way you're talking, have they actually done you a favor with 2019? Because that was the system shock that Hong Kong needed to put it on the track that you're talking about now, which is a brighter future.
Well, some people were saying this, but there are all sorts of ironies in life. Sometimes you thought that was the end of the world, and suddenly it's not. It was the beginning of a bright future. But to me personally, I would say that the experience in 2019 was very difficult and very painful. But I saw 1 or 2 articles now described what that experience has turned Carrie Lam into. They use this word, which I love it. They said Carrie Lam has been steeled by the 2019 experience. I'm stronger. I can now take whatever challenges that come my way, whatever personal hiccups that come my way, because over that period, I cannot tell you how painful and how difficult and how worried I was sitting here as the chief executive.
One of the parameters set by Beijing for what they expect from a Hong Kong leader, chief executive, was also the ability to unite society, right? So that's an important ask given what happened in 2019 and the fallout that we've seen since then. You do realize that there are still a lot of unhappy, resentful people. And I don't mean the people who threw petrol bombs and trashed MTR stations in 2019. I mean the huge crowds of people who came out to march. How are you ever going to unite them? I get the impression now that your government has reached a stage where you've said enough is enough. The ones who want to play ball, you better start playing ball. These are the rules now. And if you don't have to, and you don't have a stake in society. That seems to be the general message.
I don't think that is a general message. There's always a government's intention and objective to engage with the population, especially the younger population. And that's why we have been going all out with the policy address to explain and elaborate about the future of Hong Kong. But there's one thing that I could not compromise, and the government could not compromise, and that is one country. If solidarity in Hong Kong requires that we undermine the principle of one country, that we are very relaxed about people shouting, advocating independence, or down with the Communist Party of China, we just cannot allow that to happen. So with that, red lines now being drawn very clear, I hope, with the national security law and cases coming out from the independent courts, then people have to think very hard that if they are willing to abide by and respect one country, two systems, then Hong Kong has a bright future, because the central government is always providing strong support to Hong Kong. And governance could be improved. That needs to be enhanced in this policy address. So we will continue to do that in order to connect with the people. But at the end of the day, the people themselves have to also realize that when they look at Hong Kong as a home, they have to understand this home could only be safe when national security is being protected. When there's no national security, when the police is being undermined and smeared, then there's no point to live in Hong Kong when we reach that stage.
I want to talk to you from a journalist's point of view. This business of the fake news law that the government is talking about bringing in eventually. Now, I understand when you talk about fake news that some things were out of control in 2019. For example, this business of police executing a bunch of protesters in a train station. But when you talk about implementing or introducing a fake news law, isn't that a very slippery slope to go down? For example, I questioned you on whether you're moving fast enough with your housing program, right? Now, when I write something on that, something that won't make you happy, does that become fake news?
Of course not. That is an opinion formed on the basis of the information that you received, and you take a judgment, especially if it is an editorial and commentary of some sort. I can tell you. But we can make the same
commentary on the national security law, right? And whether it's justified to say a young kid who who did something stupid and now he's being prosecuted under national security law, where he can face terrorism charges because the nature of the offense could warrant a terrorism charge. But to call that young kid a terrorist or not, and someone like me who would write an article saying, is that kid really a terrorist? I mean, am I not getting into dangerous territory?
Ultimately, it is a question of facts and evidence and the context. So, for example, suddenly somebody asks me, is a particular slogan offending the national security law? Could not answer it. You have to look at it in context. Okay. So first of all, yes, we have said in response to a lot of aspirations that something should be done about this fake news, that we will look into the matter. We are doing research into the overseas practices. But I can promise you that we will be extremely careful, because Hong Kong is a free society, and the basic law safeguards the freedom of expression and the freedom of reporting and so on. So, but one has to agree, especially online, where there's absolutely no control. And we have seen in many parts of the world how all this incitement online could lead to real action, which will endanger the national security and the lives of the citizens. So any responsible government will have to do something about it.
There's another issue, and I know that makes you bristle a bit, but I have to ask you, because this is the perception that goes around in not only in Hong Kong but around the world as well. This is the extent of work that Beijing's representatives are doing in Hong Kong. And For example, you know, liaison office officials reaching out to the community, going to visit underprivileged homes. So there is a perception, there is a narrative that there are two different levels of government operating here, including from Beijing itself, which kind of undermines the chief executive's position.
I don't feel that the chief executive's position has been undermined by officials in the Central People's Government Liaison Office going out to visits and so on. In fact, in my various positions in the last 20 years, for example, as a director of social welfare, I did encourage CPG officials to visit some of the welfare facilities, to visit some of the elderly people so that they have a better understanding of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. So these outreaching visits are fine. But at the end of the day, who is going to devise new policy initiatives and have them implemented in order to address those problems or meet those aspirations? It has to be the Hong Kong SAR government, the executive working with the legislature in order to implement it. So I would really suggest that people just don't have to read too much into this sort of activities. They should feel happy that the central government is concerned about Hong Kong, so they need to know more about the Hong Kong situation.
So they're not teaching your government how to do things?
No,
setting the example
I don't think they could, because Hong Kong is very unique, and whatever works in the mainland of China normally would not work in Hong Kong. So who is in a best position to make sure that policies could be implemented? It has to be the Hong Kong SAR officials.
Let's move on to another subject, but this is the COVID situation in Hong Kong and the efforts we are making to reopen the border with mainland China. Now, of course, that's the priority, but can you explain what exactly are we required to do to have this all-important full border reopening with the mainland? Because the goalposts seem to move a lot. There's a lot of confusion. The rules are getting stricter here, but sometimes they're eased up a bit here, and everyone's wondering, what does it take?
Well, first of all, Yondan, COVID-19 is still with us around the world, let's face it. And the second fact is different countries are adopting different anti-COVID-19 strategies. So in Hong Kong, we have always adopted a zero infection strategy. But now we have reached a stage that after such a prolonged period of separation with the mainland of China, whether it is for the purpose of business, connectivity, it is for the purpose of compassionate visits or going to school and things like that. The first priority of the people and hence of the government is to resume some quarantine-free travel into the mainland. And in order to do that, we have to prove to the mainland authorities, particularly experts who have been sort of driving China's anti-epidemic strategy, that they have confidence in our system.
But doesn't that place Hong Kong in a big dilemma? Your position particularly, it's quite difficult. I totally understand there is a national strategy to deal with COVID right now, and that's to do with the zero COVID policy, etc. And the reopening of our border with the mainland is all important, and I understand that focus on that. But at the same time, surely, I mean, you've been getting a lot of grief from the international community who feel that that goes in tandem with getting stricter with allowing cases in, right? But at the same time, now we're against a strategy that's different in the rest of the world because they're all learning to live with the virus. So while meeting the mainland's specifications and conditions to open the borders, at the same time, aren't we closing our international borders, making it stricter and more difficult for them to come in, hence their grievances?
No, but Yondan, meeting the mainland specifications is to meet our objective of going into the mainland of China without quarantine. I don't want your readers or viewers to get the wrong impression that it's simply following the mainland rules because this is the mainland or this is the national strategy. We are trying to prove that anti-COVID-19 control in Hong Kong is a credible system that could sort of prevent any widespread community infections. Yes, you can use this word to describe our situation, this dilemma, because once we loosen the overseas controls, it will make it less credible make the system less credible in convincing the mainland experts that it is safe to open the borders with us. So we have to decide the priority for the community. Now, in terms of local business as well as people, the livelihood concern, opening up the mainland is far, far more important than bringing in overseas business people or tourists and whatnot. For the overseas business that are headquartered in Hong Kong, I fully understand. They need to be able to travel back to their country to make report and then come in and so on. But at the moment, the priority is the mainland. Because even for these overseas companies, the reason why they choose Hong Kong, many of them is because our position as a gateway into the mainland of China. If Hong Kong lost that gateway position because you cannot go into the mainland, that also defeats the purpose of the business interest.
What about the obstacles we've hit in terms of the health code sharing, the requirement on the mainland side, which is quite reasonable that any Hong Konger who goes across, according to mainland COVID protocol, they should be traceable. And that's what it's all about. But you can see the resistance in this part where people are concerned about privacy, whether justified or not. How are you going to get them to go with this program?
What we are talking about is whoever wants to go into the mainland, subject to our discussion's outcome, then you have to voluntarily provide your maybe 14-day or 21-day period itinerary preceding your entry into the mainland. So if, in case things go wrong, there's a confirmed case, then they could find you. Once this person voluntarily provides the itinerary based on the Leave Home Safe and with proper registration of a name, then they can go into the mainland under a arrangement to be agreed. And once they step into the mainland, then they have to follow the mainland code.
So this voluntary basis thing, is it as simple as that? If you want to cross over to the mainland side, you have to be willing to submit your personal details and allow them to track you as per their requirement. And if you don't want to do that, then you just stay here. Is it as simple as that?
Basically, yes. But even when you said allow them to trace you, it's when you are physically in the mainland.
Yes. Sure.
No system is available for the mainland authorities to trace Hong Kong people in Hong Kong.
Let's move to another very difficult topic or a very controversial topic, which is housing, right? And we've all been through your policy address. We've looked at your housing solutions. Your solutions, especially the Northern Metropolis, and then that goes in tandem with the Lantau Tomorrow vision. This is to create vast metropolises in Hong Kong to house people away from the city centers, the traditional city centers. So all that makes sense, but my big question for you is all of them seem long-term. People are suffering right now with substandard housing or inadequate housing or unaffordable housing. Where are the quick solutions?
The Northern Metropolis will start to produce housing 2-3 years down the road. We have already sold some private land in Gudong. Very soon you will see flats in the Northern Metropolis, in certain parts of Northern Metropolis emerging. So it's not asking people to wait until 15 years later, then you see some flats in the Northern Metropolis. Lantau Tomorrow is different because it's an entirely new area to be formed by reclamation. So we have to finish the detailed feasibility, the alignment of the roads and rail, and then to do the reclamation before we build. So the first intake will be 2034 for the artificial islands under Lantau Tomorrow. But for the Northern Metropolis, population intake will start and continue from 2 years down the road.
So in 2 or 3 years, people can start actually living in this new Northern Metropolis?
Of course. At the moment, the Northern Metropolis already contains the new town of Tin Shui Wai, Yuen Long, and North. It is a inhabited area. And we are not talking about an entirely virgin site. It's an inhabited area. But we are putting in a lot more elements to make it into a far more livable city, and preferably a work-home balance metropolis, so people don't need to commute. And one has to be very compassionate with those grassroots people who live in the north, like Tin Shui Wai. They have to commute every day into Wan Chai, Causeway Bay to work. So I want to solve this problem as well, apart from providing housing through this northern metropolis.
What about immediate fixes and immediate remedial action, right? Like, for example, with, the sizes of homes that developers are building. We are putting a limit which says around 200 square feet or something. 200 square feet is, in a city of Hong Kong's stature, its prosperity. I mean, this room the two of us are talking in is about, 1,500 square feet. 200 square feet, how is that an acceptable amount of space that you provide the public?
It's a question of quantity and quality. If we go for a very spacious units requirement, we will build less. But let me come back to you on the immediate remedy. Well, this government has been doing a lot of catching up. We have to confess that in previous governments, housing was not being taken as serious as it should be. So under the long-term housing strategy, we are projecting a requirement of 400,000 units. 70% of that will be public housing. So we have a target of slightly over 300,000 public housing, rental or sale, in the next 10 years. We got all the land, 330 plus hectares of land ready. But
so where are the houses?
The houses come, every year we are allocating to the waiting list 20 to 30,000 flats. But because the cumulative effect of previous policies is now you have a large base that you need to clear. And that's why we are seeing a deterioration in the average waiting time rather than an improvement, because every year there are newcomers on the waiting list. So it will need time to digest, so-called, this waiting list. But to say that we are only looking into the long term, not doing short term, is not fair, because we found all the land for the 10-year housing production. But meanwhile, we built transitional housing. No government prior to this government accepted the need for government to build transitional housing. So I want to give credit also to the landowners, mainly the developers, because of the 15,000 transitional housing units. Over half of the land came from private developers.
Thank you very much, Chief
No,
Executive.
not at all.
Thank you for your time and your sharing your experience with us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.